For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass House Concurrent Resolution 9.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
House Calendar Number 13, House Concurrent Resolution 9, Concurrent Resolution authorizing the use of the Capitol grounds for the National Peace Officers Memorial Service and the National Honor Guard and Pipe Band Exhibition.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on House Concurrent Resolution Number 9.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to have introduced this bipartisan resolution along with the Economic Development and Public Buildings and Emergency Management Subcommittee Ranking Member Greg Stanton of Arizona. This resolution authorizes the use of these Capitol grounds for the 44th Annual Peace Officers Memorial Event to honor the law enforcement officers who died in the line of duty in 2024. Now, according to the Fraternal Order of Police, last year there were 342 on-duty officers who were shot, 50 of whom were killed. In February of this year, a tragedy occurred in the district I'm honored to represent when multiple police officers were shot while in the line of duty, and one, Officer Andrew Duarte of the West York Borough Police Department, made the ultimate sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, he was only 30 years old. Police officers across the country put their lives on the line every single day to keep us safe. Every day, they go out, they put their uniforms on, they leave their families. They don't know what they're going to run into. Every day can be a boring day where nothing happens. You can go through a whole career that way, but you never know, and they never know, and their families never know. But every single day they are prepared. They are ready to give everything as a sacrifice to their communities to make sure that safety is preserved. That is why I and my friend Mr. Stanton from Arizona are extremely honored to once again be able to sponsor this resolution. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this resolution and reserve the balance.
The gentleman yields back. Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of HCon Res 9, which authorizes the use of the Capitol grounds for the 44th Annual National Peace Officers Memorial Service on May 15th, 2025. Thank you for your leadership of the committee chair, Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania. This incredibly important event, which is hosted by the National Fraternal Order of Police, will honor federal, state, and local law enforcement officers who lost their lives performing their duties in the year 2024. In addition to the family and friends of the deceased, event organizers expect up to 25,000 police officers from around the country to be in attendance. Among those honored and remembered will be Officer Adam R. Buckner of the Tucson Police Department, Officer Joshua Breeze of the Gila River Police Department, Detective Ryan So of the Scottsdale Police Department, and Officer Zane Tristan Coolidge of the Phoenix Police Department. Police Officer Zane Coolidge was shot in the line of duty while responding to reports of larceny, passing away at the hospital. He served with the Phoenix Police Department for 5 years and is survived by his wife and infant daughter. Officer Buckner was killed on March 31, 2024, when he was hit by a car while responding to a reported crime. He is survived by his wife, mother, sister, and 3 brothers. 23-year-old Joshua Breeze was shot and killed while responding to a disturbance call at a home in the Gila River Indian community. He had served with Gila River Police Department for less than 1 year and was still completing field training. His father, Deputy Sheriff David Leroy Breeze Jr. of Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department, Montana, died in the line of duty on November 3rd, 2006. We owe a special debt of gratitude to this family that has lost 2 of their family members, police officers, dying in the line of duty. Detective Ryan So was accidentally shot and killed after serving a search warrant and conducting an arrest in Scottsdale, United States Navy veteran who served with the Scottsdale Police Department for 9 years. Detective So is survived by his wife and 3 daughters. Mr. Chairman, this is an important resolution. This is an important event to honor police officers who died in the line of duty, and also to honor those living who are willing to die in the line of duty to serve their community. And I support this bipartisan resolution. Thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, messages from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has agreed to, with an amendment, H. Con. Res. 14, a concurrent resolution establishing the congressional budget for the United States government for fiscal year 2025 and setting forth the appropriate budgetary levels for fiscal years 2026 through 2034, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no other speakers other than myself and am prepared to close, but I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is
I have no further speakers, so therefore I support this resolution, urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my friend from Arizona implied, these are heartbreaking, heart-wrenching stories about real people. Oftentimes in our country, people look for heroes. They look to sporting fields. They look to pop culture for their heroes, but their heroes walk right among them, right in their own communities every single day. Again, being willing when they put on that uniform, when they sign up to say, I will give all for my community, running to the sound of the gun, running to the danger, unlike most other people whose sensibilities tell them to go the other way. And this is the smallest thing we can do to acknowledge the enormous sacrifice that law enforcement makes every single day in our community, and to acknowledge that sacrifice and to honor those heroes that are near and far. So in closing, I want to reiterate my support for House Concurrent Resolution 9, which will honor the fallen men and women serving our nation as law enforcement officers. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this resolution and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Concurrent Resolution 9? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 981, the Veterans Education, Transparency, and Training Act, or the VETT Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 981, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the processes to approve programs of education for purposes of the educational assistance programs of the Department of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent. All members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 981.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 981, offered by my friend and colleague, Representative Van Orden from Wisconsin. The bill would improve the information schools are required to give individuals regarding the GI Bill benefits. Currently, schools are required to give an estimated cost of education to anyone who potentially will use the GI Bill. However, there are cases where a school cannot accurately estimate the tuition and expenses for the year. This means that the schools are providing misleading information that serves the interest of the institution over the veterans due to the bureaucratic obstacles. Now, I support a veteran getting accurate estimates of what their expenses would look like. I do not support veterans having to choose a school based off of incorrect financial information. Without this fix, veterans are having to make a choice that could harm them financially in the future. This change is common sense addition to the Trump administration's mission to make VA work for veterans. Finally, this bill would also ensure that schools have a central place to find information to train their staff in charge of helping making sure students, veterans understand. In a time when government is filled with bureaucratic red tape, I'm happy that we, as a Republican majority, are making it easier for veterans to get an education. And I urge my colleagues' support of H.R. 981. And, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my support for H.R. 981, the Veterans Education, Transparency, and Training, or VETT Act, introduced by Representative Van Orden. The bill makes improvements to the shopping sheet that is offered to student veterans when they are applying to institutions of higher learning. These shopping sheets give student veterans more information about the schools they are considering before they take the major step of enrollment. This legislation improves student shopping sheets for enrollments at colleges and universities. The Isaacson-Rowe law, authored by Representative Mike Levin, created these shopping sheets benefiting student veterans around the country who now know more about what a school offers and charges. This legislation further refines the sheets so that they can be better tailored for specific school, program, and student needs. This is a welcome improvement that ensures we won't waste time on paperwork that doesn't benefit student veterans. Mr. Speaker, Democrats in the House have continued to advocate for increased transparency and quality of education for student veterans. Transparency and accountability in education are under assault with the dismantling of the Department of Education, which leaves student veterans and their hard-earned benefits at risk of exploitation and fraud. So, we must do everything possible to ensure that student veterans are able to access their educational benefits and that they can get the quality education they deserve so that they can have a better chance of success after they transition from military service. I support H.R. 981 and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Wisconsin, who's the chief sponsor of the bill, Mr. Van Orden.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. I rise in support of my legislation, the Veterans Education, Transparency, and Training Act, or the VETT Act. This bill addresses critical barriers veterans currently face with accessing educational benefits they've earned through their dedicated service to our nation. It helps ensure a smoother, more effective transition back into the civilian life. Specifically, my legislation requires educational institutions to clearly provide estimated tuition costs to potential GI Bill students. If an institution cannot accurately estimate the tuition, they must explain exactly why. And this transparency ensures veterans aren't misled by inaccurate information, preventing unnecessary debt that they would accrue. The bill directs the VA to establish an online resource center, a centralized hub regularly updated to include all available training for school certifying officials. And this simple change provides essential flexibility for institutions like police academies and truck driving schools, ensuring they can effectively support veterans and their families. At a time when this bureaucratic red tape has been strangling our veterans, this have become a barrier rather than a bridge. I'm proud to champion a bill that directly helps veterans reduce unnecessary government hurdles. This legislation aligns perfectly with President Trump's mission to make the VA truly work for our veterans. I urge all members to support H.R. 981, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close, and I reserve.
Close. Reserve.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 981, the VETT Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to encourage all of our members to support this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 981? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, says the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition.
He'd have to take it first, right? Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that the quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 983, the Montgomery GI Bill, Select Reserve Tuition Fairness Act of 2025.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 983, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to disapprove courses of education offered by a public institution of higher learning that does not charge the in-state tuition rate to a veteran using certain educational assistance under Title 10 of such code and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 983.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 983. Offered by my friend and colleague, Representative Van Orton from Wisconsin. The bill would reduce tuition costs for Montgomery GI Bill selected reservists by making them eligible for the same in-state tuition waivers. When a veteran uses other education benefits offered by VA, they are able to receive an in-state tuition. It is time that include in the MGIB selected reserves as another benefit they use in-state tuition. Last Congress, under the Republican majority, and House passed the legislation that would streamline benefits and protect taxpayers. This bill would continue that mission in the 119th Congress. Finally, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an exchange of letters on H.R. 983 between Chairman Rogers and the House Committee on the Chairman of the House Committee on Armed Services, and myself, the Chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs.
Without objection.
With that, I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 983, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my support for H.R. 983, the Montgomery GI Bill Selected Reserves Tuition Fairness Act of 2025. This bill mandates the Department of Veterans Affairs to deny courses that do not charge in-state tuition rates to veterans using certain educational assistance under Title 10. VA already has the authority to disapprove courses at higher education institutions that do not offer in-state tuition rates for other GI Bill beneficiaries. Mandating in-state tuition rates is good policy. It ensures only schools who prioritize quality education at a fair price participate in the programs. It preserves GI Bill benefits for student veterans, and it makes the entire GI Bill program more solvent and sustainable so the GI Bill stays available for veterans for generations into the future. It is also crucial to ensure that selected reservists receive the same benefits as their active duty counterparts by ensuring that in-state tuition is granted regardless of their residency. This bill will expand educational opportunities by providing them with more affordable education options. Their dedication to serving our country deserves nothing less. We passed this bill last Congress, but unfortunately the Senate did not consider it in time. I hope we finish this work in this Congress, and I urge my colleagues to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Representative Van Orden.
And is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. I rise today in strong support of my legislation, H.R. 983, the Montgomery GI Select Reserve Tuition Fairness Act of 2025. This bill holds particular significance for me because the issue was first brought to my attention by one of my constituents, Mr. Greg Tremeling, a fellow veteran, during our Veterans Day listening session hosted last Congress. His voice, joined by countless other reservists and veterans, highlighted the urgent need for policy change, and this is precisely what this government should be doing, listening to our constituents and acting on their needs. I'm honored to represent the brave men and women serving at Fort McCoy and Volkfield, whose daily sacrifices safeguard our nation and its values. My legislation will help veterans utilizing the Montgomery Select GI Reserves. My legislation will help veterans utilizing the Montgomery GI Bill Select Reserves by including them in the in-state tuition waiver that all other beneficiaries currently receive. These reservists face the same dangers and make identical sacrifices as their active duty counterparts when deployed. Their courage and dedication deserves equal recognition. Of the last 8 service members killed in the line of duty, 6 of them were reservists, the 2 remaining being my fellow Navy SEALs who were lost in the Red Sea. Their loss underscores the serious consequences of the decisions made by the previous administration. And I would remind everyone that the enemy does not care if you're a National Guardsman or woman. They don't care if you're a select reservist or active duty. They are simply aiming at the American flag on your shoulder. By passing this bill, we're going to ensure parity between the reservists and active duty service members. It's long due for a change, and I extend my personal gratitude to Mr. Tremeling for bringing this critical matter to my attention, and I thank Chairman Bost for his steadfast leadership and support. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 983. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. Speaker, we have no more speakers. I'm ready to close, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, while the House debates various veterans-related legislation today, none are more urgent than the legislation I'm introducing to stop thousands of veterans from losing their homes. Last Thursday, Secretary Doug Collins and President Trump announced the abrupt termination of the Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program known as VASP. This program was designed to prevent foreclosures for veterans with VA home loans who had exhausted every other option. With no notice, no replacement, and no plan, the Trump administration decided that these veterans are on their own. The decision came down just hours after the new Trump tariffs sent our economy reeling, plunging the stock market, increasing job insecurity, and deepening financial strain on working families, including veterans. It is hard to imagine a starker representation of their values at the very moment veterans are needing stability. The administration chose to take it away. And they did it while Republicans in Congress are pushing massive tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. The Republicans are pushing for massive tax cuts for billionaires while forcing veterans into foreclosures. Veterans who serve this nation are now calling our offices panicked, unsure that they'll lose their homes. They don't know what's next, and the truth is, neither does VA. Secretary Collins has provided no answers and no alternatives to VASP. Ending this critical support without a clear plan is not just reckless, it is cruel. And that's why I'm introducing the Foreclosure Assistance Immediately Reinstated, or FAIR Act, to reinstate the VASP program and make it clear that VA's job is to help veterans stay in their homes, not push them into homelessness. VA Home Loan Program, the VA Home Loan Program has been a pillar of the American middle class since the original GI Bill. It helped returning World War II veterans achieve economic security through home ownership. But today's veterans, facing high costs, low wages, and an unstable economy, need that same promise fulfilled. Let me be very clear. This is not a handout. These are earned benefits. Veterans stepped up to defend our country, our nation, and they deserve more than empty slogans and broken promises in return. VA had the tools and the responsibility, and has the responsibility to intervene when veterans face foreclosure. VASP was working. It already had helped 15,000 veterans, over 15,000 veterans, keep their homes, with tens of thousands more eligible. Ending it, based on the false narrative that veterans would game the system, is an insult to their service and sacrifices. This decision abandons our values. It punishes the very people who kept their promise to America. Now it's our turn to keep our promise to them. So I urge my colleagues to support the FAIR Act and send a clear message. We don't let veterans fall through the cracks, not on our watch. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Recognized.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 983 with the Montgomery GI Bill Select Reserve Tuition Fairness Act, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman yield back?
I do yield, yes.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Once again, we're seeing fear-mongering from the other side of the aisle. VA's decision to phase out Veterans Affairs Service Purchase Program, or VASP program, is an important step by the Trump administration. Last Congress, the Biden-Harris administration, during an election year, created VASP instead of implementing a partial claim program. This decision added billions of dollars to VA budget without any assurance to the taxpayer that this was a good decision. The average amount a veteran had to pay back in their mortgage was less than $25,000. Instead of solving the problem, VA chose to purchase the entire loan, which on average was about $321,000. In no way does this make sense to solve a $25,000 problem with a $320,000 solution. Therein lies the problem with our colleagues across the aisle. Rather than being wise and trying to fix it for the veterans and for the veterans in the future, instead, they do a political thing during an election year that ends up costing the taxpayers, and I'll say it again, veterans are taxpayers. This is why, under my leadership, House Republicans have a solution. The alarm on the Biden administration program and the risk it could bring to VA home loans. This is also why House Republicans have a solution in this problem. H.R. 1815, introduced by my friend, Representative Van Orton. If the ranking member is so concerned about the veterans, I ask him and his side of the aisle, why haven't they introduced a solution to aid veterans and still make sure that it actually deals with the veterans' problem, not just all of a sudden spends not only more money than they have to do to fix their problem, but creating a problem that for other veterans because they're going to drain this system. Now, I welcome the ranking member and other colleagues on the other side of the aisle to co-sponsor Mr. Van Orden's legislation and get it out of the House to the Senate. Instead of complaining, the ranking member should join us in this legislation. With that, I once again want to encourage people to get back to the issue at hand and support the bill that we were debating before. And I encourage all of our colleagues to vote for that bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 983? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1228, the Prioritized Veteran Survivor Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1228, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to clarify the organization of the Office of Survivors Assistance of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1228.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1228, offered by my friend and colleague, Representative Siscomani from Arizona. This bill would ensure that VA prioritizes its care, services, and benefits for surviving families, members of veterans as much as VA does for veterans. This bill would do so by requiring the VA Office of Survivors Assistance conducts its mission within the office of the VA Secretary. In 2008, Congress created the Office of Survivors Assistance to serve as the Secretary's principal advisor and resource on all the VA benefits and services for veterans surviving loved ones. But the Biden-Harris administration moved the office of the Secretary from the Secretary's office to the Veterans Benefits Administration Pension and Fiduciary Service. This decision to hide the office of the surviving assistance near the bottom of the VA organizational chart reflected the Biden-Harris administration's lack of commitment to the surviving loved ones of our veterans. During the Biden-Harris administration, the Office of Surviving Assistance did not have a direct line to the Secretary on the care, services, and benefits offered by the VA officials, including those outside the VBA's pension and fiduciary services that they did in the original bill of 2008. Mr. Siscomani's bill will correct the Biden-Harris administration disservice to survivors and would ensure survivors had a seat at the table again. The current administration supports this bill, and therefore, as committed as they are, I'm ensuring that the needs of the veteran surveying families are prioritized by the VA. Now, I am proud to co-lead this bill with Representative Siscomani on behalf of the surviving families of our nation's heroes, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1228, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my support for H.R. 1228, the Prioritizing Veterans Survivors Act. The bill requires VA to move the Office of Survivors Assistance, or OSA, to a position directly reporting to the Office of the VA Secretary. The Office of Survivor Assistance was established by statute in 2008 to serve as a resource regarding all benefits and services furnished by the Department to survivors and dependents of deceased veterans and members of the armed forces. OSA also serves as a principal advisor to the Secretary and promotes the use of VA benefits programs and services to survivors. VA moved the supervision of OSA from the Office of Outreach, Transition, and Economic Development to VBA's Pension and Fiduciary Service. VA made this move with the idea that it would increase emphasis on the office and oversight of OSA, as VBA has more capacity to properly oversee the function. However, the survivors community has been critical of this move, characterizing it as a downgrade of the function and a diminishing of the importance of survivors in VA's mission. H.R. 1228 is responsive to those concerns. Now, historically, there has been a lack of resources dedicated to the mission of serving survivors. For example, there are only 4 employees in the Office of Survivors Assistance to serve over 450,000 potentially eligible beneficiaries. And by the way, Secretary Collins actually fired one of those 4 people. We also see a lack of awareness of who is part of the survivors community, where the community is, and a lack of direct and targeted outreach. And that is why I'm deeply concerned by all of the DOGE cuts to VA's outreach efforts. Overall, we have seen an underutilization of survivors' benefits. So we must do whatever we can to remedy that situation. This bill is a small but important step in that process. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't also point to other legislation that we can and should be taking up to improve benefits for survivors. I have introduced H.R. 2278, the Survivors Benefits Delivery Improvement Act, a bill that puts new tools in VA's hands to aid in reaching survivors where they are and better inform them of the benefits they have earned. We have members like Representative Julia Brownlee who have introduced legislation to extend CHAMP VA eligibility. Representative Johanna Hayes, who has introduced legislation to raise the levels of dependency and indemnity compensation benefits on par with other federal survivors programs. We have Republican members like Richard Hudson, who has introduced the Love Lives On Act with Veterans Affairs Committee member Representative Kelly Morrison, that would repeal the ridiculous penalties survivors face when they choose to remarry. My hope is that we can consider those bills soon. In the meantime, however, I do support this bill, and I encourage my colleagues to support it as well. And I want to extend a special thank you to the survivors who may be listening today and those who are with us only in spirit. Your stories demonstrate bravery and courage, and you deserve every ounce of our effort in creating a VA that is welcoming and accessible, and every dollar of benefits we can muster on your behalf. Mr. Speaker, I support this legislation. I ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize for as much time as he will consume the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Sissamani.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Boss, for yielding me time today to speak in support of my bill, H.R. 1228, the Prioritizing Veterans Survivors Act. Since being elected, I've heard from military service members and surviving family members about their struggles accessing VA benefits. In my district, I started a Veterans Advisory Council, and we often discuss this very topic to find ways to better this situation. I'm always looking to ensure that Department of Veteran Affairs leaders hear the concerns of veterans' loved ones. From its creation, the Office of Survivors Assistance, OSA, was meant to serve as the principal advisor to the VA, to the VA Secretary, and all survivor benefits and services as well, including medical care and burial benefits. When the VA placed OSA within the Veteran Benefits Administration, they deprioritized survivors' policies and skirted Congress's intent when it created this office. My bill would fix this by requiring OSA to operate within the Secretary's office, thereby prioritizing advocacy and services for service members and veterans surviving spouses and families as well. I'd like to highlight the comment of a member of my advisory council, my Veterans Advisory Council, Ms. Jane Strain, a surviving spouse and an Army veteran herself. She said surviving spouses and families cared for children, moved many times during a military career. compromised their careers, and maintained home life while the service member deployed have earned and deserve attention when the spouse has passed. Placing the OSA directly under the Secretary will help to recognize the importance of this population. I was proud to work alongside Chairman Boss on this to ensure survivors have a seat at the table. I urge my colleagues to support and pass this common sense legislation again in the 119th Congress, as it did without objection last Congress. And with that, I yield back my time.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers. I'm ready to close, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to return back to the issue of VASP, and I want to read aloud a letter that I'm circulating to my colleagues for signature to the Secretary. And it begins with, Dear Secretary Collins, on April 3rd, 2025, you abruptly announced the closure of the Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program, otherwise known as VASP, leaving tens of thousands of veterans at risk of foreclosure. These actions were taken unilaterally, leaving veterans, veteran service organizations, and mortgage servicers unsure how the closure would be administered and how the closure would be administered and what would happen to veterans that are already reeling from this administration's assault on veterans and our economy. We write today to urge you to immediately reverse this decision and avoid foreclosing on veterans who simply wish to keep paying their mortgage and keep their home. Since the inception of the Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program, or VASP, in May of 2024, over 17,000 veterans have been able to avoid foreclosure and remain in their homes. This represents 0.46% of the 3.7 million total loans under the VA Home Loan Program. VASP was established as a last resort option within VA's home retention waterfall to help veterans impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. During this emergency, Congress and VA rightfully allowed borrowers to request forbearance and allowed missed payments to be added to the end of the loan term. Upon expiration of this pandemic program, VA used its authority to end borrowers' ability to push missed payments to the end of the loan term and created VASP to help up to 80,000 veterans at risk of foreclosure. Now VA is taking a misstep that will push thousands of veterans into foreclosure. This is cruel, wrong, and runs counter to the benefits earned by the veterans as led by the VA Loan Guarantee Office, which always seeks to use foreclosures as an absolute last resort. Furthermore, with the rising costs of housing and overall inflation, VA must ask itself, is it more cost-effective to allow veterans to lose their homes or help them? If VA leaders and veteran service organizations and housing organizations have all recently shared with Congress their concerns about ending VASP too soon. All have testified that VASP is the only program of its kind that currently exists as the last resort for veterans facing foreclosure. Critics of VASP who believe the program will incentivize veterans to purposely default on their loans to get a lower mortgage rate grossly misunderstand and mischaracterize the sacrifices veterans and their loved ones have made in service of our nation. VA should learn from its past when in the 1990s, GAO found that VA-insured homes foreclosed upon was the most expensive option, costing VA an average of $25,387, which is the equivalent of $65,038 today. While past policies have assumed that veterans have been financially irresponsible for assuming mortgages they can't afford, today's financial and housing market puts veterans at risk of losing their homes in a much more vulnerable situation. Even a straightforward solution, such as forcing veterans to sell their homes to cover their arrears, would not leave the veteran better off precisely because the cost of housing has increased dramatically in the past 5 years. Until better policy solutions are in place that provide for stronger underwriting, ending the VAST program abruptly will only harm veterans and their families. Congress, VA, and other stakeholders must work together and offer practical, cost-effective solutions that better serve veterans. Our veterans earn their home loan guarantee benefit, and they deserve a viable option to get back on track with payments and keep their homes, Secretary Collins. You have repeatedly stated that the mission of VA is to serve veterans and that no benefits would be cut. We call on you now to follow your words. Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close, and I reserve.
Gentleman is recognized.
I'm prepared to close.
Oh, well, I'll now say thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 1228, the Prioritizing Veteran Survivor Act, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very clearly to our veterans and the taxpayers, I say that a partial claim bill would not only cure the problems that these veterans are having with their home loans, and if the ranking member and the other side of the aisle will work together with us with the partial claim program, we can actually do that. But by going down the path that he has just said, he says he's for the veterans. Apparently he's only for the veterans today because the veterans of tomorrow will not have the program because it'll break the bank. So this is actually sensible. It is a way that we can do this. We can make sure that our veterans are taken care of. With that, we do need to pass the bill that we were just discussing, which is 1228. And with that, I move ask all of my colleagues to support this bill. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1228? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
Speaker.
The chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative.
Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from
I
Illinois?
object to the vote on the grounds that the quorum is not present and make a point of order that the quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move that we suspend the rules and pass H.R. 586, the Vietnam Veterans Liver Fluke Cancer Study Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 586, a bill to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to study and report on the prevalence of carcinoma and veterans who served in the Vietnam theater of operations during the Vietnam era and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 586 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 586 as amended, offered by my friend and fellow veteran, Representative Lilota from New York. Representative Lilota's bill would require VA to conduct a study and produce a report on the frequency of bile duct cancer for veterans who served in and around the Vietnam War. Speaker, it goes without saying that many Vietnam veterans suffer greatly in the service for their country. Thousands of Vietnam veterans still live with the invisible and visible wounds of war today. My own uncle is one of them. He served in Vietnam and, like so many others, suffered debilitating injuries from his service. Sadly, many never receive the treatment or recognize they deserve they recognize that they deserve it when they come home. Today, we're still learning about the full extent of the health risks these veterans faced, some of which weren't understood at the time. One risk may have come from something as simple as a routine as eating local food during their deployment. Certain uncooked fish consumed in Southeast Asia are known to carry a parasite called a liver fluke. The parasite can cause infection and long-term scarring that may lead to bile duct cancer. This is a rare but serious illness here in the U.S. and one more commonly found in the region where our veterans served. This bill would require VA to study whether the bile duct cancer is linked to service in Vietnam and whether this rare condition should be considered service-connected. One of VA's most important missions is to care for the injuries veterans sustain while they serve this country. This study would help uphold that sacred obligation. I want to thank my fellow veteran, Mr. LaLota, for his leadership on this bill on behalf of our veterans, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 586 as amended. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my support for H.R. 586, the Vietnam Veterans Liver Fluke Cancer Study Act, as amended. Liver fluke is a serious parasitic infection that is a well-recognized risk factor for the development of bile duct cancer. H.R. 586, as amended, would require VA, in consultation with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to commence an epidemiological study on the prevalence of bile duct cancer in veterans who served in the Vietnam War versus their non-veteran U.S. resident counterparts. This legislation requires VA to submit a report with the results of the study broken out by age, gender, race, ethnicity, and geographic location. I certainly understand why Vietnam War veterans would be concerned about their exposure to this disease and believe we should do everything possible to ensure veterans have access to care and treatment for diseases they may have been exposed to as a part of their service. However, I must note that the context in which we are considering this legislation is vastly different than the last time this bill was considered by the House just under 7 months ago. In fact, under Secretary Kennedy's leadership in the past week, the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control, has cut 18% of its workforce. Many of these roles have been in global and environmental health roles, which means the individuals and offices best suited to assist with the requirements of this bill may no longer even exist at the CDC. Vietnam War veterans deserve answers about their health and access to the best treatments. Under this administration's chaotic and damaging workforce cuts across all sectors of government, it will be harder than ever to get these answers. I will support this bill today, but I urge my colleagues to consider that implementation of this bill will be harder than it needs to be in the new CDC workforce realities that we are now in. These workforce cuts have real and lasting consequences, including for our veterans. In addition, while I support the underlying goals of this measure, I must express concern of the majority's decision to offset its costs by diverting pension payments from some of VA's oldest and sickest veterans. The VA pension programs exist specifically to assist our most vulnerable veterans and their survivors. Slashing these benefits, particularly when other support systems are also under threat, poses a significant risk to those who rely on them most. I recognize that this offset has been employed historically and in some form since the 1960s. However, in light of this administration's ongoing efforts, enabled by a complacent Republican-led Congress to systematically weaken VA, we must reevaluate whether it remains appropriate to rely on this offset. I believe it would be prudent to discuss with the Senate whether a more appropriate offset can be identified before this bill becomes law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with those caveats I've identified, I do support this legislation And I ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to yield as much time as he may consume to the sponsor of this bill, Representative LaBlota from New York.
Gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank the chairman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, a weekend or two ago in Suffolk County, I stood with nearly 1,000 Long Islanders at a Vietnam War Veterans Day ceremony. The theme of the day was simple but powerful. Welcome home. Welcome home after serving in a war that was unpopular at home. Welcome home after surviving brutal jungle and guerrilla warfare. Welcome home after losing more than 58,000 brothers and sisters in arms. Welcome home to a nation and a healthcare system that wasn't ready to care for your wounds, seen and unseen. Today, Vietnam veterans across my district and across the country are still fighting. But this time, the enemy isn't on a battlefield overseas, it's a silent killer. Bile duct cancer caused by a parasite known as liver fluke. Multiple studies have confirmed what these veterans have suspected for decades. Those who served in Vietnam face a much higher risk of contracting, suffering from, and dying from this disease. Yet, and here's the most disappointing part, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Veterans Affairs continues to hide behind a familiar excuse. We don't have enough data. And let me tell you what we do have. In 2018, the Northport VA Medical Center on Long Island, right in the heart of my district, conducted the first of its kind study on this issue. From a small sample of 50 Vietnam veterans, 24% tested positive for exposure to the liver fluke parasite. That study raised the alarm and called for further research, standardized treatment, and expanded access to care for affected veterans at VA facilities across the country. But instead of urgent action, we got bureaucratic delay. It wasn't until 2024, 6 years later, that a second follow-up study was finally completed. And what did it find? Exactly what our veterans have been saying all along. Marines who served in Vietnam were 30% more likely to die from this disease than those who served elsewhere. And still, the VA refuses to acknowledge this as a service-connected condition. And Mr. Speaker, that is unacceptable. We've seen this pattern before with Agent Orange in the Blue Water Navy, and now again with liver fluke. Delay, denial, deflection. In response, I introduced H.R. 4424, the Vietnam Veterans Liver Fluke Cancer Study Act, a bipartisan bill requiring the VA, in partnership with the CDC, to conduct a nationwide study and finally confront the truth. Bile duct cancer caused by the liver fluke parasite is a service-related illness. Since the VA won't act, Congress must. Because our Vietnam veterans deserve more than parades and speeches. They deserve answers, care, and our action. Mr. Speaker, every day we wait, more veterans die without the care they deserve. Let's not repeat the failures of the past. I want to thank Chairman Bost for his support of this legislation, and I urge all of my colleagues to join me in standing with those who once stood for us. They answered the call, and now it's our turn. Thank you, and I yield.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers. I'm ready to close, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 586, the Vietnam Veterans Liver Fluke Cancer Study Act, as amended. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage all of our members to support this bill, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 586 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the chair's opinion, aye.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays. I request the yeas and nays.
Okay, the yeas and nays are requested. Those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. Sufficient number have risen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1039, the Clear Communication for Veterans Claims Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1039, a bill to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to seek to enter into an agreement with a federally funded research and development center for an assessment of notice letters that the Secretary sends to claimants for benefits under laws administered by the Secretary and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Tankino, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1039 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1039 as amended. This bill was introduced by my friend and fellow veteran, Representative Barrett from Michigan, and I am proud to be a co-sponsor. Now, H.R. 1039 as amended would require VA to contract with a research entity to improve the notice letters VA sends to veterans and survivors who file claims for VA benefits. VA provides veterans with their survivors' information throughout the VA claim process. Now, it's important for these notice letters to be understandable so that the veterans and survivors know their rights and how to navigate the claims process. And I'm pleased to see that the VA has recently improved some of their notice letters. Some. But hundreds of others VA letters are still difficult to understand. At a recent hearing, we heard from veterans, advocates, and VA needs from help from outside experts would give the huge number of letters that VA must draft. We still hear from veterans that many of VA letters are too long, filled with legal jargon, and contain information that is not relevant to their claim. These complex letters sometimes cause veterans and survivors so much confusion and stress that they just abandon their claims. As a veteran myself, I continue to receive long and complex letters. You shouldn't have to be a member of Congress or an attorney to understand how the VA claims process works. H.R. 1039, as amended, would ensure that none of VA notice letters discourage veterans from accessing the benefits they've earned. Representative Barrett's bill would ensure that VA sends veterans and survivors understandable notice letters so that they can make informed decisions about their claims. Further, the modernization bill is supported by the administration. I would also like to thank our veteran service organizations for their support of this common sense bill. Now, I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 1039 as amended, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support for H.R. 1039, the Clear Communications for Veterans Claims Act. When a veteran applies for benefits at VA, the agency corresponds with that veteran at multiple points in the process regarding their claim. This communication is often through letters which can be densely laden with legal jargon and confusing information, which makes it hard for the veteran to understand what's required of them or the benefits decision VA has arrived at. Now, this can lead the veteran to miss important deadlines or fail to submit proper documentation, which can ultimately lead to the rejection of their claims. Under the Biden administration, VA already launched an internal review of these notice letters and had already redrafted many of them to be more direct and easier to understand. But VA could also use some outside help in reviewing the literally thousands of different possible letters they might send to a veteran. H.R. 1039 seeks to provide that assistance. Specifically, it mandates that VA make its notice letters, documents that explain decisions on benefits, shorter, clearer, and easier for veterans and their families to understand. This bill requires that the VA to contract with a third party to assess and recommend improvements to these letters, which often contain complex legal language that confuse veterans. The bill also sets deadlines for action. The VA must contract with a federally funded Research and Development Center, or FFRDC, to evaluate these communications within 30 days of the bill's enactment and submit its recommendation within 90 days. This effort aims to streamline the claims process and reduce the stress and confusion many veterans face when dealing with their benefits. Mr. Speaker, in spite of my support for the substance of this measure, I do want to raise concern with the majority's choice to offset for the cost of this bill by continuing to divert pension payments from the oldest and most sickest veterans in the VA system. I understand that this offset has been used in the past and has existed in some form since the 1960s. However, given that this administration, with the enabling of a feckless Republican-led Congress, has been working overtime to hollow out VA, we must rethink whether or not it is appropriate to continue its use. Aside from the moral failing of cutting one veteran's benefit to pay for another, VA's pension program are designed specifically to support the poorest and sickest veterans and their survivors. So this continued reduction in pension payments poses real risks when other services these veterans might need to fall back on are also cut. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I support the substance of this bill, but I think we should have a very serious conversation about the majority's choice to perpetuate cutting veterans' pensions, and I believe that we should include this item in any negotiations with the Senate before this bill becomes law. Mr. Speaker, with those concerns in mind, I do support this legislation, and I ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield as much time as he may consume. The sponsor of this bill, Representative Barrett from Michigan.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my very first piece of legislation that I introduced as a member of Congress, H.R. 1039, the Clear Communications for Veterans Claims Act. This bipartisan bill, which I'm proud to lead with Chairman Boss, thank you, sir, and Representative Baczynski, the ranking member of the subcommittee that I lead on Chairman Boss Committee, will make it easier for veterans to access the care and benefits they've earned by making significant improvements to our overly complicated claims process. You've already heard from other members today about issues with veterans filing claims and running into problems with forms and legalese and bureaucratic speak and things that are not easily understood. I can tell you personally, I've seen this myself in applications that I've had and interfacing I've had with the VA and challenges you get when you receive things in the mail. It's hard to determine from that, is this an update on the claim that I have filed? Is this a resolution to that claim? Is this seeking more information, or is it simply a delay saying that they don't have a resolution to the claim yet? It can be very difficult to figure that out, especially if you have multiple claims within the same packet. When a veteran files a claim, it means they need help. Yet too often they receive long, confusing letters full of legal jargon that leaves them with more questions than answers, ultimately leading them to call into a claim center or a helpline, which overburdens that and slows down the overall claims process. This is unacceptable. Claims letters should be the catalyst to care and benefits and not the obstacle. That's where my bill, H.R. 1039, requires the VA to make these notices clear, concise, and easy to understand while also streamlining the department's overall communication with our veterans. As you heard already, it requires the VA to partner with an outside agency, not the bureaucrats within the VA, to make this communications easier and more streamlined for veterans to understand. Often when you're working within the industry, it can be very difficult to put yourself in the position of those receiving these letters to understand what would be best absorbed by them. Our veterans serve the United States military with honor. They shouldn't need a lawyer or specially trained advocate to explain a claims letter to them. When I was elected to the state legislature in Michigan 10 years ago, I became the only Iraq War veteran in the entire State House of Representatives. I work closely with my federal members of Congress to help veterans obtain their benefits, and I maintained then that if I were ever in a position to make the process more streamlined and easy to understand, I would commit myself to doing that. This very first bill in Congress makes good on that commitment. I'm proud to offer that today. I want to thank you and the rest of the chamber for taking up this bill for consideration. It's time to give America's heroes and their families a clear and efficient claims process that actually works for them. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bill that would do just that. Thank you, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 4 minutes to my good friend, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization, Representative Budzinski from Illinois.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of the Clear Communications for Veterans Claims Act, bipartisan legislation that would simplify the Department of Veterans Affairs correspondence for our nation's heroes. I'm proud to lead this bill with Chairman Tom Barrett, who I serve with on the House Veterans Affairs Technology Modernization Subcommittee. Every day, my office hears from veterans who are struggling to get the benefits that they earned because of overcomplicated documents and bureaucratic red tape. Correspondence from the VA regarding benefit decisions, often called notice letters, usually contain complex legal jargon, which can be confusing, frustrating, and stressful for veterans and their families. The Clear Communication for Veterans Claim Act is a common sense solution to this problem. This legislation would require the VA to study and provide recommendations for simplifying VA notice letters. The goal is to make these letters shorter, easier to understand, and more comprehensive so veterans have the information they need for the next steps in their claims process. Our veterans have sacrificed so much in service to our nation, and we must do more to improve access to the critical services they need and deserve. Right now, our veterans are facing great uncertainty and anxiety. This bill would make a real change in their lives. We owe it to them now more than ever before. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this important bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve. I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close and reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
I have no further speakers, and I'm ready to close. I reserve.
Gentleman's reserved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join with the ranking member and ask all of our colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1039 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. And depending on the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative. For what purposes does the gentleman from Illinois seek?
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number have risen. The yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 877, the Delivery for Veterans Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 877, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to expand the authority of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to provide or assist in providing a vehicle adapted for operation by a disabled individual to certain eligible persons by paying expenses associated with the delivery of such vehicle and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Tancano, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 877 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 877 as amended, offered by my friend and colleague, Delegate Moreland from Guam. H.R. 877 as amended would allow VA to pay for the shipping price of special adapted vehicles for disabled veterans. Currently, service-connected disability veterans who are unable to drive due to their disability can work with the VA to get a vehicle that is adapted for their use. This is an important program and helps disabled veterans in their daily lives by allowing them to drive to medical appointments, the grocery store, and to work. Unfortunately, shipping costs are not currently covered, creating a financial burden on veterans who want to make their lives better. While this might not be an issue for some veterans, other veterans are unable to get a vehicle adapted for them because there are no resources capable of making the vital modifications nearby. Delegate Moreland's bill would correct this issue by including shipping costs the $24,000 VA provides to support veterans who are having trouble accessing the resources they need for any adapted vehicle. In a time when bureaucracy is getting in the way of doing what's best for our veterans, Congress must intervene to eliminate the red tape and provide the necessary assistance our veterans deserve. This bill would do just that and would save hundreds of dollars for disabled veterans across the country. It would also ensure that the disabled veterans have the ability to get to a job and to earn money to support themselves and their families. I thank the DAV and the VFW for supporting this bill last Congress and for their timeless work on the Hill advocating for this legislation. Now, I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 877 as amended, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support for H.R. 877, the Deliver for Veterans Act. This bill would make it easier for disabled veterans to obtain the adaptive automobiles they are entitled to through their service-connected disability. If signed into law, this bill could save veterans tens of thousands of dollars on shipping costs of vehicles. 2 Congresses ago, we passed the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act, a bill authored by Ranking Member Mike Levin and Representative Lizzie Fletcher, which expanded the adaptive auto benefit for veterans, allowing them to get a new vehicle if 10 years have passed since last using the benefit. This bill from Representative Moreland builds upon that work by simplifying the process for veterans who require their adaptive vehicles be shipped. This includes veterans who live in areas such as Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Northern Mariana Islands. Mr. Speaker, again, I support the substance of this bill, but I think we should have a very serious conversation about the majority's choice to perpetuate cutting veterans' pensions, and I believe that we should include this item in any negotiations with the Senate before this bill becomes law. I urge my colleagues in the House and Senate as well to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like at this time to yield as much time as he may consume to the delegate from Guam, Mr. Moreland.
The gentleman from Guam is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of my bill, H.R. 877, the Deliver for Veterans Act, a critical piece of legislation addressing challenges faced by veterans in remote areas, including Guam. As the representative of a region where the unavailability of adaptive vehicles poses a significant barrier to our veterans, I urge my colleagues to support this essential measure. Veterans in remote districts across our nation face immense challenges because of the lack of access to adaptive vehicles. These vehicles are essential for veterans with disabilities to lead independent and fulfilling lives. Unfortunately, the high cost of shipping to remote areas has created an insurmountable obstacle for many of our veterans. They are forced to cover the expensive shipping fees, a cost that should not be borne by those who have already sacrificed so much for our country. Whether it is for medical appointments, running errands, or simply visiting family and friends, adaptive vehicles are a lifeline for veterans in Guam. H.R. 877 will provide much-needed relief to our veterans, ensuring that they can access the support and services they rightfully deserve without facing financial hardships. Let us stand together in solidarity with our veterans in Guam and all areas around the world and ensure that they receive the support they need and deserve. I implore each and every one of my esteemed colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 877, the Delivery for Veterans Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers. I'm ready to close, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close. And
Gentleman from California is recognized.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 877, the Deliver Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I ask
from
all of
Illinois is
my
recognized.
colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 877 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 970, the Fairness of Service Members and Their Families Act of 2025.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 970, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to periodically review the automatic maximum coverage under the Servicemembers Group Life Insurance Program and the Veterans Group Life Insurance Program, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 970.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 970, offered by my colleague and Representative Strickland from Washington. H.R. 970 would require VA to regularly review and compare the maximum coverage for VA life insurance programs to keep them in line with the average cost of living changes. The maximum coverage of these programs is provided by law and under current law does not automatically adjust for cost of living charges or changes. In any increases in the maximum coverage for these programs requires congressional action. But we must ensure that we have all the data we need to make an informed decision on whether the maximum coverage has kept pace with the cost of living. The bill would help us do that by ensuring that VA sends Congress the results of the VA review so that we can decide whether to adjust the maximum coverage for VA life insurance programs. We are duty-bound to ensure that families of our veterans are taken care of after their veteran loved ones pass away. This common sense bill would provide us with the data to help Congress do just that. Now, I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 970, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support for H.R. 970, the Fairness for Service Members and Their Families Act of 2025. Mr. Speaker, just a few short years ago, we increased the maximum coverage amount under the Service Members Group Life Insurance, or SGLI program, and the Veterans Group Life Insurance, or VGLI, program from $400,000 to $500,000. Prior to that, however, those maximum coverage amounts had not been increased since 2005, clearly failing to keep pace with inflation. To ensure that we are not waiting another decade or more to improve this benefit for our service members and veterans, my good friend, Representative Marilyn Strickland, has introduced this bill, which requires VA to periodically review coverage amounts every 5 years and report to Congress what the level of benefits would be if adjusted for inflation over that period. This will allow Congress to regularly make a more informed decision about whether or not these maximum coverage amounts should be increased. Mr. Speaker, this is common sense legislation that allows Congress to better do our job to support service members, veterans, and their families. This legislation passed the House last Congress, and I encourage my colleagues to support it once again. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized and reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend and author of this bill. She currently serves on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Armed Services Committee, the gentlewoman from the state of Washington, Representative Strickland.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ranking Member Takano, thank you for yielding. I rise to express my support for my bill, H.R. 970, the Fairness for Service Members and Their Families Act of 2025. I first want to thank Chairman Bost and Luttrell, Ranking Members Takano and McGarvey, for working with me to get this bill to the floor. I also want to thank my partners in this effort, Congressman Keith Self and Senator John Cornyn. The Fairness for Service Members and Families Act will help ensure that life insurance benefits for service members and veterans account for changes in the economy. This bill will require the Department of Veterans Affairs to periodically review and report on the maximum coverage available under the Service Members Group Life Insurance and Veterans Group Life Insurance. Accurate and reliable data will allow the VA to make necessary policy adjustments to ensure accurate payments. I have the honor of representing Joint Base Lewis McChord, home to tens of thousands of service members and their families. Our service members courageously put their lives on the line for our country, and we must secure the well-being of their families and loved ones in the event of a tragedy. Service members' life insurance plans must keep pace with economic demands. A robust life insurance policy can provide a grieving family with the financial security they need to navigate the loss of their loved ones and do so with dignity. The brave men and women who sacrifice their lives deserve peace of mind knowing their families will be taken care of. For nearly 2 decades, the maximum coverage of the Service Members Group Life Insurance and Veterans Group Life Insurance programs have been stagnant, even as the cost of housing, goods, and services have risen over the past 20 years. This bill ensures that these programs are reviewed periodically to verify their value sufficiently and to make sure they're updated to the current CPI, or Consumer Price Index. I urge my colleagues to support this. I want to thank my colleagues for their unwavering commitment to supporting veterans. I look forward to this passing and for it to be signed into law. Thank you, Mr. Takano. I yield back.
The gentleman from California reserves.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no more speakers, and I'm ready to close, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close, and I reserve.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 970, the Fairness for Service Members and Their Families Act. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 970, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 970? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, consistent with applicable law, including the National Emergency Act 50 U.S.C. 1601, NEA, and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act 50 U.S.C. 1701, IEEPA, I am providing notice of certain actions I have taken to deal with the unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States economy and national security posed by the underlying conditions of our trade with foreign nations, including a lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships, disparate tariff rates and non-tariff barriers, and foreign economic policies that suppress domestic wages and consumption, as indicated by large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits. The threat has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States in the domestic economic policies of key trading partners and structural imbalances in the global trading system. In my judgment, actions under the NEA and IEEPA is necessary and appropriate to deal with the unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and economy of the United States. Executive Order 14257 of April 2, 2025, regulating imports with reciprocal tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to large and persistent annual United States goods trade deficits. The executive order declares a national emergency arising from the non-reciprocal trade as evidenced by large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits. Such trade deficits have led to the hollowing out of our manufacturing base, inhibited our ability to scale advanced domestic manufacturing capacity, undermined critical supply chains, and rendered our defense industrial base dependent upon foreign adversaries. To deal with this national emergency, I have determined that it is necessary and appropriate to impose additional ad valorem duties on imports of goods from our trading partners under IEEPA. The additional ad valorem duties shall be imposed on imports of goods from all U.S. trading partners at verifying rates, subject to exceptions specified in the executive order. The specific foreign trading partners and the applicable duty rate for each trading partner are listed in Annexes 1 and 3 of the executive order. It is necessary to apply additional duties on the imports of goods from all U.S. trading partners to reduce the overall U.S. global goods trade deficit and incentivize trading partners to take significant steps to remedy non-reciprocal trade practices, as well as align sufficiently with the United States on economic and national security matters. My administration will continue to consult with the Congress on our efforts to deal with the unusual and extraordinary threat described in this report and the executive order. As described in executive order, the United States Trade Representative, in consultation with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, the Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing, and the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, is authorized to submit reoccurring and final reports to the Congress on this national emergency. The executive order further explains the circumstances that necessitate the exercise of authority under IEEPA and the NEA, why I found that those circumstances constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States to the national security and economy of the United States. The authorities exercised and the actions to be taken to deal with those circumstances, why I determined that such actions are necessary to deal with those circumstances and the foreign countries with respect to which such actions are to be taken, and why such actions are to be taken with respect to those countries. I am closing a copy of the executive order I have issued. Signed, Donald J. Trump, the White House, April 7th, 2025.
Referred to the Committees on Foreign Affairs, Ways and Means, and ordered printed. And pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.